Good evening, everyone. A little bit early. I'm going to give quite a few minutes so everybody can join. If everyone feels comfortable enough to turn their cameras on so we can see you, we're kind of out of quarantine, halfway in. If you don't feel comfortable, that's okay too. But we'll definitely give everybody a little bit of time to join in. So we do have the chat box open too. For any questions, comments, concerns. We have Jason Scott here tonight. Hello, Jason.
Hello, how are you?
Good. He's here to discuss capturing the flag, why it's important to us. So in a few minutes, we'll let him get started with that. So most of you know me, I'm Kiana Campbell, your level up coach. I'm always harassing you with emails and testing dates. So good evening. Good to put faces to names. So we'll get started in about 3 or 4 more minutes and give some people a few more minutes to check in. All right, I like round numbers. So it's about 6:35. I'm going to go ahead and let Jason take over. I made you a presenter. So once again, I'm Kiana. I am your Level Up coach. This is Jason Scott. He is from, tell me one more time, is it the name of your company?
CyberHactics.
And he's going to be telling us about capture the flag and why it's important. So Jason, take it away.
All right, good evening, everyone. Let me go ahead and share my screen real quick. Can you guys see my screen okay? All right. So my name is Jason Scott, and I'm here to talk to you guys about Capture the Flag events. But first, a little bit about me. So as I stated, my name is Jason Scott. I'm currently serving in the United States Air Force as a cyber warfare operator. I've been in the Air Force for a little over 15 years now. I've been in cybersecurity for roughly 6 years. I'm what's referred to as an ethical hacker for the Air Force. What that means is that with permission and without breaking any laws, I hack into other Air Force systems in order to highlight any weaknesses or vulnerabilities so that the networks that we're defending can be fixed or to become more secure. Most of the systems that I've helped to protect and support with the Air Force are things like the F-35, F-16, and A-10 aircraft. I love working on CTF so much that I actually started my own company with the intent of building CTFs and in the future preventing training as well. CyberHactics focuses on developing CTFs for educational purposes and to provide some STEM outreach. It's still in its infancy right now, but in the future, like I said, we are hoping to provide more of a training platform for anyone who wants to sharpen their skills in cybersecurity or information security. And if that wasn't enough, I also have a third job where I work for a company called Cerberus Sentinel. With that company, I work as a cybersecurity consultant where I conduct network penetration tests on customer networks, a little similar to what I do in the Air Force, again, with permission and coming from a legal approach. I basically test clients' networks to make sure that any vulnerabilities that can be exploited are identified so that they can patch them before an actual threat comes in and compromises their networks. So cybersecurity is something that's always piqued my interest, which led to my passion for building CTF events. So some of the events that I've helped put on, I've built about 11 CTFs, including 2 Hack the Arch events in 2016 and 2017, a bunch of Hacktober events. We had one last year called Hacktober 2020, which garnered almost 3,000 players across the world. So that was a lot of fun. Another event called Guardian CTF, which was an Air Force run event. And then this year, we're building an event with CyberUp called Deadface CTF. And with this event, we are hoping to attract at least as many as we had last year. So hoping for around 3,000 global competitors. Yeah, and on top of that, we've done more events, especially with CyberUp. I've developed other of their events, notably some iGen CTFs, and a bunch of other events they've had in the past. So what is a CTF? That wasn't supposed to show up yet, but I'll go with it. A CTF is a hacking competition where players solve challenges and break into machines in order to catch digital flags. The name is based on video games that typically have like a capture the flag mode where players need to capture a flag in order to earn points. So very similar. That's what a capture the flag is when we talk about cybersecurity, CTFs. You're trying to get into networks or compromise systems to get a flag to show proof that you were able to compromise that system. And usually the point of a CTF isn't to encourage hacking, but it's to show the vulnerabilities that exist in the real world and how adversaries are able to exploit those vulnerabilities so that as network and cybersecurity defenders, we know how to better secure customer infrastructure. Usually these flags exist as some kind of data or string, and they're usually submitted to a website known as a scoring server for points. So what you see at the bottom here is just an example of what a challenge might look like, where it'll say, you know, decode this message and submit the flag. Yeah, kind of went over this. It's CTFs are usually hacking competitions where players solve challenges. Flags exist as files or data within those challenges. Submit for points, and that's when that should have shown up. An example is decode the message and submit the flag. So what this example is it's a base 64 string, and this is usually the simplest kind of challenge you might see in a CTF, where you need to find out what message this encoded string says. And towards the end here, I'll show an example of how a basic CTF challenge is created and how it's solved. So again, a little more background for me. So the first CTF I ever played was called SANS Net Wars back in 2015. If anyone is not familiar with SANS Net Wars, SANS is a certifying body that provides some training for pen testing or network defense. They have a variety of courses that they offer. Their Net Wars is a CTF style environment they have that's geared towards helping you exercise some of the skills taught in their courses. Net Wars is their on-demand CTF, and it usually comes with training that they provide. The downside to Net Wars is that it can be pretty expensive. Last I checked, a Net Wars license was around $3,000, and that was several years ago, so I only imagine it's gone up since then. About 6 months after my first CTF, I started working on Hack the Arch 2016. And the reason I highlight this is because there's always a reason, there's always a need for individuals to help build CTFs. And so when I first found out a need for building a CTF, I kind of just jumped right into it, because my philosophy is the best way to learn anything in cybersecurity is just jump into it and do it. Even if you don't feel confident, if you feel like you don't have enough knowledge, being exposed in an environment that allows you to exercise those skills and practice them will help you grow as a cybersecurity professional. About a year after that is when I ran my first CTF. This one was called Hack the Arch 2017. It was a local competition in St. Louis. We had around probably 100 competitors for that event. It was mostly in person with a little bit of remote players involved. But ever since that event, that's when my passion for building CTFs really took off. And after that, I ran Hacktober 2018, last year Hacktober 2020, and for this year we're running an event called Deadface 2021. Again, trying to target a larger audience than what we had last year. All right, so what motivates, I say me to build or play CTFs, but really what motivates anyone to build or play in CTFs. So folks that like to build or play in CTFs usually enjoy solving puzzles or solving challenges. Usually have a passion for cybersecurity or programming or any of the other fields relating to cybersecurity. Usually people drawn to build CTFs love to educate and test others. And usually you need a good breadth of creativity when it comes to building CTFs. I'll say that from my experience with CTFs, I enjoy building them much more than I enjoy playing them, because there's a lot of satisfaction that you get when you are able to build a good, challenging challenge that others enjoy being able to play at to test their skills. So what kind of people play in CTFs? Usually anyone with an interest in computers, programming, or cybersecurity. And again, that can be anyone regardless of experience level. So a lot of CTFs, unfortunately, try to challenge experts. And so it can be a little difficult initially getting involved in a CTF because you'll find that a lot of them are very challenging, even for seasoned professionals. But there are resources that I'll go over for beginners or anyone that is not as experienced with CTFs. Any CTFs that we build as CyberHactics, we try to appeal to the broadest audience possible. So folks who are brand new, they know how to use a keyboard and mouse and that's it, all the way to industry professionals who have years of experience and exposure. Like I said, people who enjoy solving puzzles usually enjoy playing in CTFs. People who enjoy light research, it might come as a surprise, but there are people who actually like going out and researching various topics and torturing themselves, going down rabbit holes of learning like assembly language, the nitty-gritty details of what it takes to exploit a vulnerability. Some people really enjoy that, and we see that a lot in our CTF competitions. And then people who like breaking things. There's a lot of folks out there, I've learned, because I have some experience as a developer, and I've learned that no matter how secure or well you build an application, someone's going to break it. Whether it's intentional or accidental, somebody is going to break it. And some people enjoy breaking things. So for those folks, CTFs are a good avenue for them to practice that in a safe and legal environment. So why do people participate in CTFs? It allows individuals, I just said this, it allows individuals to exercise their skill set in a safe, legal, and controlled environment. It can be a little tempting for especially those folks who like to break stuff. It can be a little tempting to find a web application on the internet that you know is vulnerable to either SQL injects or cross-site scripting. But to keep everyone out of trouble, CTFs are here as a playground to practice those skills in a safe, controlled environment where you will not be penalized. It challenges those seeking to better understand their tradecraft. So you might be in a situation where you feel like you know everything there is to know about JavaScript programming, and then you play a CTF and realize that somebody has created a script or an application with a vulnerability that you never even considered in the past, and that you might have realized yourself that you have programmed in that way or practiced insecure methods of doing things. And so CTFs are a good way to learn different ways to secure code or identify vulnerabilities in applications. It also kind of segue into there. It also exposes individuals to new hacking concepts and methodologies, because again, you can be supporting a business or an organization and think that you know the ins and outs, you know what's vulnerable and what's not, and then play the CTF and realize, oh my gosh, I never realized this thing can be used this way. And so that's what one of the good things about CTFs is, usually, especially for new vulnerabilities. For example, there's a vulnerability that came out a few days ago about Razer, the brand Razer hardware, that gives any user that has access to the the physical device, admin access to a Windows machine. And so in a legal environment, if you're using somebody else's machine with a Razer mouse, you run into some risk of legal issues. But in a CTF, if somebody says, usually there's not too many physical CTFs, but if you have the option to practice in a physical CTF, somebody might say, hey, there is a Razer mouse attached to this machine. Using this new vulnerability that was found, try to hack or try to get admin privileges on this box based on this vulnerability that just came out a few days ago. So that's one of the great things about CTFs is it allows you to practice some of those vulnerabilities that come out, again, in a safe and legal controlled environment. So how do you play CTFs? Most CTFs are accessed through a website known as a scoring server. It's usually just a website with a bunch of challenges that can either be represented as a list or as little boxes on the screen. You click them and it tells you the information that you need. Yeah, and so the kinds of challenges that can be solved, you kind of solve them directly from the scoring server, or they might give you, they might say, hey, visit this website and do some recon on it, find out what vulnerabilities are on it and try to exploit it, or through files downloaded from a scoring server. So more often than not, what you'll see is a website that says, challenge one. Click on challenge one and it'll provide you files to download that can be exploited. So they might have vulnerable code that you run. They might point you to a remote machine where you'll run that code on that machine in order to exploit it. Or in the case of like steganography, they might provide you pictures and you have to try to find hidden data within those pictures. You'll also typically in a CTF need to use various operating systems and tools. So one of the a big emphasis in CTFs is Linux, only because Linux is free and open source. It's easy and free to just host a Linux machine. Whereas if you wanted to host like a Windows machine, usually you have to have some kind of license. Same applies for Mac OS. So usually in CTFs, you'll see a lot of Linux-based operating systems, and then tools. So there's a lot of tools that do not come standard on Windows or Linux that you'll be exposed to and expected to use in a CTF in order to solve different challenges. Yeah, so some of those tools are things like Nmap, Nikto, Wireshark. If you're not familiar with those tools, Nmap is a network discovery tool. That's common in a lot of remote challenges. So a scoring server might point you to a remote website. You can use Nmap to see what ports are open on it, see what services are running, because it might reveal a vulnerable service on that website that you could exploit. Nikto, very similar. It's a web application scanning tool, and it'll do a similar thing. It'll look for vulnerable software or open directories on a web application. And then Wireshark, of course, is for network traffic. So another kind of challenge you'll see in CTFs are PCAPs. So they'll provide you a network packet capture, and then you'll need to look through that capture to see what artifacts are in there, if there's plain text passwords being sent across the network, etc. This says use competitors, but it's really any competitors. So some advice for anyone that's interested in competing in a CTF, get smart on Linux, because like I mentioned, because Linux is free and open source, it's used very prominently in CTFs. Learn how to use command line tools. Most pen testing or open source tools do not have a GUI. So knowing how to traverse a file system using a command line tool, knowing how to use things like SSH, Netcat, Nmap, all of which are mostly command line tools, is good to know. Another big thing that you guys can do to learn more about how CTFs are solved are reading CTF write-ups. So one thing I found out last year with our Hacktober CTF was I knew the solution to all of our challenges. So I had it documented somewhere so that in case anyone needed help, I knew how to solve it. And then at the end of the event, folks would write up write-ups. And I found that a lot of people found solutions to the challenges that I never intended uh, to be used. And so what's cool about reading CTF write-ups is you can see all the different ways that people are able to solve different challenges in CTFs, how they're able to exploit web apps, how they're able to exploit vulnerable code. And it not only makes it easier for future CTFs, but also it also has very real world application as well, where you can look at how somebody exploited code and maybe it'll apply to the organization that you support. I would recommend for anyone to start with an on-demand CTF, something like Hack the Box. Hack the Box might be a little advanced for beginners because you actually have to hack your way to the login screen or to the sign up screen. So that might be a little difficult. The good thing is though, there's write-ups on that, so I guess you could just look that up and cheat. Learn the basic principles of common CTF categories. So some of those categories I'll go over in the next slide, but there's very common categories that are almost applicable to every CTF, which also align with categories that you'll often see in cybersecurity as well. And then I would also advise to start with non-competitive CTFs that are geared more towards educating than they are competition. So there's some static persistent CTFs that I'll show you at the end of this that are geared towards learning as opposed to competing. So those categories that I mentioned are cryptography, that deals with encryption, hidden messages, encoding, ways to communicate from one host to another so that you can't someone sitting in the middle can't see the communication going back and forth. Steganography, that is the practice of hiding data inside of other data, like pictures. And I'm actually going to show you an example, a very simple example of how steganography is done at the end of this here. Packet analysis, like I mentioned, that is the communication between two computers and actually looking at that conversation between the two. Programming, that's anything like Python, C, C++, C#. SQL, so SQL is a big one that in the CTFs that we CyberHactics put on, we put a big emphasis on SQL. The reason behind that is because anything stored in a database, anything that stores personal information or customer information, sensitive information, is usually stored in a database. And so it's important to know SQL, how to query those databases, because that's basically the treasure trove of information that hackers go after. They want to go after personal information, and all of that is stored in a database. So we try to emphasize SQL in a lot of our CTFs. That way, players are made aware of how hackers can potentially compromise that information. And then OSINT, open source intelligence. That's a big one that we also try to focus on in a lot of our CTFs, because the number one way, the first step usually that hackers will take in compromising a user or an organization is to gain information that the user themselves put out on the open internet. So OSINT is a way to find that information. So we build challenges for our CTFs to highlight how easy it is to find information just out on the open. Again, this says students, but how anyone can build their skills. So practice. Like I mentioned, there's several online resources. Hack the Box is a great resource. Again, I would say that on a skill level, it's somewhere in the middle. It's not in my opinion, it's not quite meant for beginners, at least not fresh beginners, because you do have to initially hack your way into the site in order to sign up. And then they use a weighted scaling system for their challenges. So I think of it like grading on a curve. If everyone who plays on Hack the Box is an expert, they might grade a challenge as easy, whereas for a beginner, it's nowhere near easy because for them, they've never seen anything like that before. So it's a little difficult assessing how easy Hack the Box is. Rootme.org is another good resource. That, if I remember correctly, it's been a while since I've used RootMe. That one, individuals can upload challenges to the website, and other players can go attempt to exploit the machines they put up and try to solve the challenges that way. Over the Wire, so both Over the Wire and HackerFire are both really good resources for brand new, fresh people who have never had real experience playing in a CTF. Those are very introductory level. Over the Wire, if I remember correctly, has a little bit of instruction to it. Same as HackerFire. And then anything else, if you're looking for a CTF, if you're just bored on a weekend and you want to see what CTFs are available, ctftime.org has, it advertises a bunch of CTFs that are going on at any given time. So they usually have a lot of CTFs that are open to the public. So for our CTFs, we advertise on CTF Time. So anyone from around the world that wants to go to CTF Time can look on there, see our CTF coming up, and then sign up to compete in that. For those interested in building their skills with virtual machines, there's VMware. The downside to VMware is it costs a lot of money. So if you don't have a license provided by your employer or school or wherever you're using it at, it can be a little pricey. VirtualBox is a free alternative. VirtualBox works great, in my opinion. It can do pretty much everything VMware can. If you want to get a little more advanced, Proxmox is another resource you can use. So Proxmox is a free, I don't know if it's open source, but it's free. It is a virtual machine environment similar to like VMware ESXi. I have a Proxmox server sitting in my office here where I host all of my VMs. Like I said, everything's free, so you don't have to worry about paying. But the learning curve there is a little steep because it does take a little bit of experience to know how to set up Proxmox and stand up a virtual machine. But if you have the time to dedicate to it, I'm a big proponent and supporter of Proxmox, and I think that's the way to go. Some do's and don'ts of CTF. So do participate in CTFs. Most are free. You'll almost always learn something in the process. I still play CTFs every now and then, and I always learn something new that I previously didn't know before going in. CTFs also require a lot of patience. Sometimes some CTFs can be very frustrating. For our CTFs that we build at CyberHactics, we try to make them as not so trolly. And what I mean by that is you might play a CTF where they just give you a file that's encrypted and say, find the flag. And they don't give you any context. And so now you have to try every trick in the book to figure out this challenge. For our CTFs, we don't believe in that approach. We believe in a context-based CTF. So not only will we provide you the challenge, but we'll give you information on what you're looking for exactly, why you're looking for it. That way you're not busy going down a rabbit hole, trying to figure it out one way that has absolutely nothing to do with what the actual challenge is. Also for CTFs, document everything. A lot of CTFs reuse methods, so it's important to document how you solve challenges, because odds are you'll see them come up again in other CTFs. And then not even if we look outside of CTFs, there have been plenty of times where I've played in a CTF, found a way to exploit something or found a way to do something on a network, and then I in turn then use that on a real world pen test because I knew it worked in a CTF. So now I take that method and because I documented it, I'm able to use it in an actual pen test for either the Air Force or my other company. So being able to document all that and be able to reference it is going to be a huge help in the real world outside of CTFs. The other big thing is use a VM. I harp that because I've hosted CTFs before where individuals tried to use their host machine and they ended up screwing with configurations and settings that made it very difficult to reverse. Some CTFs also use real live malware. And so if you're using your host machine and you're running malware, you could potentially brick your machine. I have one example of an event that I didn't put on, but I played in an event where they were using ransomware and somebody wasn't using a VM and ran that ransomware on their machine and encrypted their device. And thankfully, the host of the CTF had the private keys to unencrypt everything, but if they didn't, they would have just bricked their machine because they weren't using a VM. And then some don'ts for CTFs. Don't use passwords in a CTF that you would use in real life. So I have also seen CTFs that were poorly built. Well, not even poorly built, they were maliciously built so that they were tracking passwords that people were using in their CTF environment and storing those in a word list, which means they could then go and either use those passwords to potentially compromise an account that you own, or use them to use in real life. And so you want to make sure that when you're playing in a CTF, you're not using passwords that you use for real life accounts that you own. And then don't download any CTF files on your physical machine. Only download files inside VMs. So for the same reason I mentioned with ransomware, some CTFs use actual malware, and what you don't want is to run that on your actual machine and then compromise your machine. Before I get into the demo, does anyone have any questions on anything that I've presented so far? All right, nothing heard. Then with that, let me jump into a demo real quick. Give me just 1 sec while I pull this up. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show how a basic steganography challenge is built. Like I said before, steganography is being able to hide data within other data. So an example that might be you have a picture that has a secret file or a secret message embedded within it that at face value, you won't be able to see. So what I'm going to do is I got this picture of this hacker dog. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide a message inside this file that just says, this is a super secret message, tell no one. And you can actually do this natively on Windows without any special tools being downloaded. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to run this command. What this is doing here is it's copying that hacker dog file, and it's appending to it that secret message.txt file that I showed. And I'm going to create a new file called new hackerdog that includes that message. This /b here just means that I'm doing a I'm copying the binary of one file to another. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. It says one file copied. Go back here and you can see there's this new hacker dog image. It looks pretty much the same as the last image. With the naked eye, you can't see it, but there actually is an extremely subtle difference between these two images. There are tools you can download that will allow you to change the alpha channels and some of the other configurations on the image, and it'll kind of point out some of those differences. But at face value, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between these two. So what we can do now is I'm going to, on Notepad, on my new HackerDog file, and I apologize, I just realized this is probably too small for you guys to see. So I'm going to run Notepad on that new HackerDog image, and you'll be able to see. So first, you see a bunch of garbled nonsense. This is just the actual image that you're seeing in text form. But if you scroll all the way to the bottom, we see that message. Let me try to increase the size of this. You'll see that message from that file sitting at the bottom here. So basically what we did was we took that message and we appended it to the end of this picture. And there would be no way for you to see that unless you opened it, unless you're actually looking at either the binary, the hex, or the plain text of this image. And so this is an easy example because it's just plain text, but you can also hide other file types. So I can zip up another file and also append it to this image. And that could be potentially used as a way to covertly send out information from one network to another. So if I'm an attacker and I've hacked into an employee's workstation, I can use this method because it's native to Windows. I didn't have to download any tools to do this. Let's say I want to take a spreadsheet that has employee salary information. I can take that, zip it, use this command to copy it to an image, and then from that employee's workstation, email it somewhere else. And if the organization is not using some kind of IPS or some kind of agent-based solution that looks at files leaving or entering the network, they may not see this. And so what the organization is going to see is, oh, Joe Smith sent out a picture of a dog. There's nothing malicious about that, but really it's got a zipped file full of employee data in it. So that's just one easy example of how some CTF challenges are designed. And another cool tool to use, especially for cryptography, is CyberChef. If you guys have never heard of this tool, if you decide to play in a CTF at any point, any kind of cryptography or steganography tools, this is like a Swiss Army knife tool to use. It does a lot of great things. So I mentioned before at the beginning of my presentation, let me find that slide. We had that that decode this message box here. You can actually decode this in CyberChef. So I can say from base64. I know it's base64 because I have experience. Usually if you see a string that ends in an equal sign or a double equal sign, it's a good indicator that it's base64, because base64 uses equal signs to pad empty spaces at the end. So you can plug that in and it shows in clear text, you know, flag, this is the flag. And this would be the thing that you plug into the scoring server. And there's a ton of different tools on here that can be used. CyberChef is a great tool to use for cryptography and steganography challenges. And not even just CTF challenges, but in real life as well. you can use this. So that's all I have for the demo. Again, does anyone have any questions, comments regarding CTFs or anything that I presented thus far?
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
My name is Joseph, by the way. Scripts, is that fair or unfair when participating in the CTF? Can you use your own scripts, or is it a thing where I mean, pretty much what I'm asking is, can you come with your own bag of tricks and then, capture the flag, or is it a thing where you guys have rules?
Not only is it allowed, it's usually encouraged to build your own scripts or bring your own scripts. There are some weird CTFs that get in the way of that. So NetWars is one of those because you have to use their environment. And I don't know if it's changed, but when I last played in it back in, I think like 2017, it wasn't open to the internet. So you couldn't bring your own tools. You had to use whatever was available. But most CTFs encourage you to script, bring your own scripts. It's usually bad practice if you're using scripts that somebody else developed the exact same challenge, because CTFs are a competition, but they're also a good learning opportunity. And so that mostly pertains to competitions that repeat. So NetWars is one of those. It's a static environment that only changes every so often. So if you go play NetWars and you downloaded your buddy's scripts that he used for NetWars, you're not really learning anything. You're just executing someone else's scripts without understanding what they do. But yeah, usually in a CTF, building your own scripts is highly encouraged.
We have a question in the chat from Adrian. She says, you mentioned the opportunity for creativity. Can you give an example of one of the more creative CTFs you've seen?
Yeah, so I'm going to shamelessly harp on the CyberHactic CTF because so one thing that frustrates me with CTFs is the lack of creativity. And so, like I said, you'll see a lot of challenges that are like kind of like this. Hey, here's a string, solve the flag. It's like, well, cool. Why am I solving that? So, shameless plug. CyberHactics, our Deadface and our Hacktober CTFs, we do a lot of that. We integrate a lot of creativity. So one way that we do that is we like to build stories around our CTFs, because providing a CTF with a coherent story where all the challenges tie together is more realistic, and we feel it'll provide better context into why challenges need to be solved and why certain information is important. So one thing we do for our CTFs is we set up that background. Oh no, I might have discontinued this. Oh no, there it is. So I'm going to show you last year's page here. So we built this forum because usually if you have an attacker group that you're going after, particularly with hacktivists, they usually communicate online. So what we did for our CTF last year was we built this forum where we have all these fake accounts talking to each other. Fun piece of trivia. We have all these different users with all these different conversations. They're all me talking to myself. I didn't have any kind of like AI or anything to generate conversations. So I painstakingly went in here and just made up conversations with myself. So, we have forums where users are communicating. And so one reason why we do this too is because we want to provide that context for a lot of our challenges. So if somebody sees a challenge and they see like this image, for example, cool, they know that data is hidden in here, but what kind of data? How is that data hidden? And so we provide a little bit of context in here without giving away the answer, because real life, you'll have some kind of context to go off of for why an attacker is doing something the way that they're doing it. So this is the kind of creativity that we incorporate in our challenges. We also we have a whole process that we go through, and I'll show you the one from last year. I don't want to show this year because if any of you guys want to play, I don't want to give you any pointers. Where we actually create fake personas of people. We've got all these different, we've got these logos, these fake companies that we create, different users that we have, different social media accounts for these users. Just again, to build up a story behind the CTF so that it's not a boring, here's a program, find the flag. Like you actually have some context around why you're solving these challenges and what's going on in the background. Hopefully that answered that question.
That was great. Thank you so much.
I have another question in the chat. What distribution of Linux should we be using as beginners and why? Because you did mention that we need to be learning Linux.
Yep. So the two that I would say are the most helpful when it comes to CTFs, and again, in my opinion, just learning about Linux in general, are Kali Linux for pen testing. Kali Linux comes packed with a bunch of tools already built in that usually are helpful in CTFs or even mostly in real world situations. When I do real world pen tests, I use a Kali VM. And then also Ubuntu, because Ubuntu is it's fairly easy. It's easier than most other distros to learn. You can either learn through through downloading a VM with a GUI or a minimal VM that just has command line. But those would be the two that I would recommend learning first, is Ubuntu and Kali Linux.
Awesome.
Does anyone else have any other questions before I hand it off?
I do. I have another question.
Sure.
I recently had a very educational experience dealing with the VPN and trying to keep a botnet out of it. And I was wondering, is there any way possible? I mean, is it humanly possible to defeat a botnet? I mean,
so I don't think it's possible to really stop botnets from being created as long as there are vulnerable users installing software that enables botnets.
mm-hmm.
You're not going to defeat botnets. Now you can prevent botnets from accessing machines that you have. So you mentioned the VPN. Is that like a VPN server that botnets are trying to log onto?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
basically, it was a VPN server that needed to. I was performing port security, and I could not perform it fast enough because I was swamped. And I mean, it's a real life situation. I got locked out of my server, man. So,
yeah.
I'm thinking, do you guys do anything kind of along those lines in the CTFs as far as, all right, let's get this server up. Let's, just basically you're just turning it on. So when you turn it on, nothing's turned off. All the ports are open, and you gotta go at it to make sure you lock it down.
There are some CTFs that focus on defense. The biggest one that comes to mind is Cyber Patriot, but that's more geared towards like high school kids, middle school kids, and it teaches them how to securely configure a machine. So they would do exactly like what you're talking about. In the CTFs that we build, in most CTFs that I've seen, it's usually the opposite. It's like, hey, this VPN server is poorly configured. Find a way to break into it. And the point of that is to show how how a misconfigured server can be exploited.
Right.
Usually, unless there's training tied to it, there isn't really, no, they don't really go into like what you can do to secure that machine. Unfortunately, there are a lot of resources that do teach that kind of stuff. Udemy has a lot of courses on that.
Hmm.
TCM, Cyber Mentor, has a lot of resources on that as well. But since you asked the question regarding VPN, your VPN server, the best way to secure it from bots trying to being able to successfully access it would be to use something like fail to ban. Assuming they're trying to SSH in, you can use this
Right.
software called fail to ban that will you can configure it to ban IPs if they try like 5 or more attempts.
But the catch to it is that you have to initiate it, and they're already attacking.
Yeah.
So it's like if you, it's kind of like, I mean, well, everything runs on switches, so they're waiting for the right switch to open. And if you tap that switch, I mean, you can go back and try. You can undo what you did, but they're already in. That was it. It's over. So, I mean, I know from like personal experience, it was crazy, but I mean, I learned a lot from it. But you guys don't necessarily do that with what you do. Like, I wouldn't see that in a CyberUp collaboration like CTF with you guys. Probably wouldn't see
Right.
that. Okay.
We do collaborate with Jason, but not in that respect. I mean, we have a Hacktober event coming up in October, but it's for Power Up Cyber Games. So we have our own Power Up Cyber Games too.
Well, that question's for you too.
We don't do, but it's for more of the capture the flag type of games in a Hacktober event, but it's not for real world events. So
Okay. Okay. Well,
but
yeah,
I
that was
have worked for, in a real world environment that I've used a VPN, but I've never had a bot situation
Yeah.
because I've
Oh,
had several firewalls to prevent that.
yeah, right, exactly. Exactly. You have your firewalls, you're supposed to set your firewalls up before, but for some reason, this guy was already behind them, which I was kind of like, okay. So it was a real world experience. And I mean, I got a chance to talk to guys who actually do server security, and it was, I mean, they were shocked that I could, spot it. But I mean, my phone was lighting up for like 3 hours every 10 minutes.
Yeah.
With notifications of a brute force attack. It was crazy.
Hmm.
But that's it.
Yeah. The important takeaway there is layered security.
Yes,
You know,
exactly.
firewalls, varying access controls. Yeah, because one firewall won't solve it.
Right.
Yeah, you need multiple layers of defense there.
Definitely.
Any other questions?
But segue into Hacktober events. I know we see each other enough, but we do have Hacktober events coming up in October.
Yep, and actually, I'll take this opportunity to advertise it because that's a joint venture between CyberHactics and CyberUp. Is to go over Hacktober. So if you guys want to check out, I'll post this link in a chat here. But we have a blog on the event over at CyberHactics that just talks about what the event is. So this year, it's going to take place on October 15th and October 16th. That should not say 17th. I'll change that. It is from October 15th to October 16th. Registration is going to open up on September 1st. The actual site is already open. If you go to ctf.deadface.io, The scoring server is open. It's not open for registration yet, but you can go here. This is where you'll go when you actually sign up. Kind of already talked about the team that's involved. So all the events that we've put on. Again, the story, because there was that question about creativity. This blog talks a little bit about the story behind the event. It's very Halloween themed. So when we actually, if you guys decide to play it in the CTF, you'll see a lot of Halloween, scary, horror themed CTF challenges. Again, the CTF is advertised to the broadest audience possible. We don't want to just attract industry professionals. We also want this event to appeal to folks who are brand new to cybersecurity. All the categories I already mentioned. Recognition for our sponsors. So we have Uncommon and DigitalOcean sponsoring this year. The prizes for this year, last year we only gave prizes to US-based teams. This year we're kind of opening it up to everyone. But there are still US-only prizes that are offered. So CyberUp is offering first, second, third place prizes in the amounts of $400, $200, and $100 per team. And then DigitalOcean is also providing prizes as well in the form of DigitalOcean credit. If you guys don't know what DigitalOcean is, it's basically, it's an alternative to Amazon Web Services. It's a software as a service platform that allows you to stand up VMs, and you pay for the service that you want. So like if you want I think their cheapest service is a $5 a month VM. Very lightweight, but it's great if if you don't have VMware, if you don't have Proxmox, but you want to hurry up and stand up a VM to practice some skills. You can stand up a DigitalOcean droplet for $5 a month and get in there and practice some of your skills. They also have a bunch of pre-configured apps. So if you want to, like, for example, if you want to stand up a WordPress site, they have some pre-built WordPress DigitalOcean droplets. You can just click on one, create it, and then you've got a WordPress VM stood up. They have a whole bunch of different types of VMs and applications that they provide. So they're offering credit this year in the amount of $250, $125, and $100 of DO credit. That's per individual. So we have 4-man teams for this year's event. So 4 people will win $250 each for DigitalOcean credit, and so forth, but second and third place. In addition to DigitalOcean credit, CyberHactics, we're also offering digital badges. One thing that we found last year, we experimented with doing badges, and we found that people love digital badges apparently. So much so that I was being hounded for a month after the event from folks who wanted their digital badge. And sadly last year, because a lot of the, I've got a bigger team this year, but last year it was primarily me. So I had to accommodate 3,000 players who were demanding badges. So this year we've got a bigger team. We've got some lessons learned from last year, so we shouldn't have that same problem. But all that to say that we have digital badges for people, and usually folks like to get these badges. They like to put them on LinkedIn to show their accomplishments. It's great. We've gotten a lot of great feedback on the badges. These are just a sample of them. We have more than just the competitor and the first, second, third place. If you do a write-up for any challenge, we award author badges to show that you provided a write-up for your challenges. And then other ones like First Blood. So if you're the first one to solve a challenge, you'll get the First Blood badge.
Yeah, we like badges.
What's that?
I said we like badges. We
Yeah.
gave out badges too.
Yeah, folks like digital badges. But there's more information on here for this year's event, and this is a little bit of a hint, I guess, for anyone that is planning on playing in this year's DeadFace CTF. We write a lot of blogs that are applicable to some of the challenges in our CTF events. So you might see something on here, a challenge that talks about, building a Caesar cipher, and don't be surprised if you see something about Caesar ciphers in our CTF events. So our blog site is a good resource to go to for learning various topics on CTFs and cybersecurity in general.
And the website is just Deadface. What's the website?
So this site with the blog is blog.cyberhactics.com. Let me, I don't know, chat from here. There we go. Have that in there. So hopefully that went to everyone. That is the site where we have all of our blogs. Then this is the site for the CTF when it goes live. I would also recommend that you guys follow our Twitter, because this is where we post most of our updates for our events. So if you follow there, you'll see everything, especially on game day when we have our CTF. That's where we're going to be doing a lot of our communication. We also have a Discord server that you can join, and that link is right here on the ctf.deadface.io site, as well as all of our other links for our other social media.
Perfect. I'm also putting the WeCyberUp.org website in here too. That also has a little more information about the Hacktober Power Up Cyber Games in there too. So I think that is all the websites you guys are going to need for this capture the flag.
So one last round. Are there any more questions before I hand it off?
This was so informative. Jason, thank you so much. Does anyone have any more questions?
I do. I have one.
Sure.
How is first, second, and third determined? Is it how many flags you capture, or is it how fast you capture?
It is the number of flags. So every flag, every challenge will have a point value. And so at the end, it's whoever has the most points is the winner. So speed doesn't necessarily, well, it doesn't matter. It's all about how many points you rack up.
So you really could be the slowest team, but get the most points. You just get the biggest flag.
Yep.
This is really a cool candidate meetup. I thank you a lot, Jason. This is very informative.
No problem. Thank you guys for coming and listening to me talk.
So I will give you guys probably one of the most precious gifts, and that is time back. If no one has any more questions, then I will be in your inboxes very soon, bugging you about something else.
I got 2 questions real quick. My first question is, I've done capture the flag with school, but I haven't really done any, as you guys was out in a while. So how likely is it that there are actual, say, employers or recruiters or anything along those lines looking at the CTFs? That's my first question.
So I'll say it depends on the organization. Some organizations value it if you have a LinkedIn profile, you show the different CTFs that you're involved in. Some employers might like that because it shows that you are actively improving your skills or putting yourself in a situation where your skills get improved. I've also seen companies that don't care either way. But in my opinion, it's better to have it and show it and not need it than for a recruiter to pass you up because they're not seeing you're doing your own sort of professional growth.
Oh, I'm sorry. I muted you because you were kind of crackly.
Oh, that's fine. The other question I had was, are you on LinkedIn, and do you regularly make connections like with CyberUp students or other students at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So on LinkedIn, here I can go ahead and throw that in the chat. I'm on LinkedIn. I accept connections from pretty much anyone. Come on. So I'll go ahead and throw that in there. Yeah, I don't post a whole lot on LinkedIn, but usually for anything cyber related or CTF related, I'll throw something on there. And I'm happy to connect with anyone that's interested in connecting.
Thank you.
Great, Jason. We're gonna bug you now. You're gonna get 1,000 of our connections.
That's fine. I love answering questions. I love educating. It's part of the reasons why I stood up CyberHactics. I thoroughly enjoy educating and teaching folks, especially anyone that's interested in joining cybersecurity.
Awesome. And I was gonna piggyback off of her first question. Just anything experience related in cybersecurity. I think any employer would love to see that on somebody's resume, or you know what I mean, in their experience section. Yeah, because anything that shows you've been trying to do something cybersecurity related, I'm sure they would want to see that.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that will set you apart from others, right? So if there's two cybersecurity professionals, whether they're entry level or what, if they have bare bones on their LinkedIn profile or on their resume, and you have all these things that show your level of engagement, that's going to set you apart from other candidates, other recruits.
Yeah. You have 6 capture the flag competitions on yours and they have none. You clearly have more experience. Well, you guys, if you have any more questions, feel free to either email me or I guess send Jason messages on LinkedIn. Or feel free to put them in the chat if you don't want to ask them outright. But I'm going to call time. Everybody, thank you so much for joining our candidate meetup. This has been a really, really good one. I do thank everybody for participating. Thank you so much. Have a great evening. Like I said, I will be in your inboxes very soon. Wait a minute. Somebody have a question? Yes, this is a great one. So you guys have a great night. We'll be in touch very soon. Bye.